Hey everybody, welcome to my Suburban Oasis. My name is Soleil and I garden in a Zone 5B in mid-Michigan, and it is a beautiful sunshiny day out today, and I just finished doing a video for you guys that was fantastic where I talked about what it takes to kind of help your plants be successful if you're planting in really hot weather. So I thought we would spend a little time to do that again because it didn't record. All right, so let's get started. I think that we really have a great topic today because it is the heat of summer, and so many of you have talked a little bit about many of the deals that you're getting. You know, I myself got some deals at the Home Depot and Lowe's recently and want to get those plants in the ground. I don't want to necessarily sit here and spend all of my time watering pots once or twice a day in order to keep them healthy until fall. That's just not realistic for me. And I don't know if it's realistic for you either. So we can definitely spend a little bit less time watering if we get those plants into the ground and find a good spot for them. So I thought I'd share some tips with you to get started. And the first one is plant in the evening. And so the first reason why you would want to plant in the evening is because in the evening it's cooler. The temperatures have kind of sizzled down a little bit, if you will, and it gives an opportunity for the plant to kind of settle into its hole overnight and let all of that soil settle around it. The other thing about it that is so helpful is that you can really initially water the plant that night and get it really well watered, but then it can absorb all of that overnight and be ready and fresh for the morning. And then when you get up in the morning the next day, you can water it a second time, really thoroughly watering it so that it gets that deep down drench. Now, that second step isn't always fully necessary, but I find that it really helps with giving that plant a good fresh start for the day because it really has a chance to suck all of that water up before it comes to that really scorching part of the day, you know, mid to late afternoon, where everything is hot and the heat is just kind of accumulated after the sun's been beating down. And I know we've got a lot of really hot temperatures on the way here. We're looking at the mid 90s this week, so it's kind of crazy. And I know there's people who have been in the triple digits for extended periods of time, and I can't even imagine, you know, trying to keep plants alive. In those kind of temperatures, I probably would recommend actually that you just put them in a sheltered spot such as a garage or something like that for a few days so that they can stay in the shade and you are not watering them every single hour. That would get probably pretty crazy. So the next tip that I have is when you're planting into that planting hole, make sure that you water the planting hole before you even put the plant in. So fill that water hole up at least full once, let it drain down, and depending on how dry the soil is at the time that you're planting, you may want to repeat this a couple of more times. That way the soil can be saturated and the roots on your plant are going to want to continue to reach out into the soil and start developing. That's really important because otherwise, you know, you're still watering a plant that's kind of like being in a pot. It's just the roots are shaded a little bit more because they are in the ground. So that's a real key thing. Water that hole thoroughly. Fill it all the way up to the top. Now, if you have really good drainage, it might not fill to the top, so you might just have to water it for several minutes to really get a good saturation, and do that a few times. Then you want to get it in the hole, and then, like I said, water it in really thoroughly. Make sure that the soil has really good contact with the root balls so that there are no gaps of air so that the heat and air can get in and dry it out. That's super important as well. Another thing to think about is new growth. So if you have a perennial that you're planting into the ground in the heat of the summer, if you see any new growth on it, it's really important to think about that new growth because it's very sensitive compared to the rest of the plant. So you might want to just give the plant a trim, take some of that new growth off before you plant it. Otherwise, it's probably going to be prone to wilting and damage from the heat and the sun. Another thing to think about is using Biotone. So I don't typically use Biotone, but it is something that can help roots establish more quickly And so this is one of those times that I will use it because it's so important during this time of year that the plants have an opportunity to absorb all of the nutrients and water that they need, because they get depleted so quickly during the day, especially if you don't have cool nights. And I know in some of those southern states it stays hot all night long in addition to the daytime. So here we are lucky, and it usually gets down into the 60s at night, and that just helps with the plants adapting over time. But either way, you are going to have a lack of sunshine at night that will help the plants adapt overnight. So after you've used the Biotone, again, that is just going to be part of the whole process to make sure that you've got them into the ground and that you're giving the roots the best chance at establishing. You've removed some of the new growth, you've given it some great water. Now, how do I maintain that plant after that plant has been in the ground? So you're just going to want to watch it. I actually will then water a second evening. So I water when I plant it that night, I'll water the next morning, and then I'll water again that night. And when you water, it's really important that you water the root ball. Don't water the plant and the foliage, because you're watering so much during the heat. And if you have humidity, some plants are prone to powdery mildew during, really humid times or when it's dry out. So you don't want to create an opportunity for those type of diseases to develop. So make sure you're watering down around the root ball only. Point your hose down at the base of the plant and keep it there. Again, really, really saturate it that night. This is going to be basically more like it's getting a really good rain. Now, we all know that the hose water is not as good as a rain. And that brings up my next point, which is if it's going to rain, that is a fantastic time to plant. Watch your weather calendar, because there are always thunderstorms during the summer that kind of pop up. And so if you keep your eye on the weather calendar and you can see that one is coming and you have a chance for some natural rain, that really creates the best conditions for planting. So try to plant the night before a natural rain is going to occur, or even if one's going to occur at night that night. It's just fine. It's a really great way, though, to get your plants established quickly and give them the best start, because we really want to take these plants that we invested in or that we got such a great deal on, and we want them to be successful. So it's important to take some of these steps, and I think you'll find that these will be really helpful. So I just want to take a minute today at the end of this video to kind of show you a little bit about what I did over here in this garden bed during the video while I was talking to you about the plants that didn't turn out. So let's take a look at what we did. All right, so this front garden bed faces east, and so this gets morning sun. I do not recommend planting in the heat of summer in an area that gets full sun and bakes all day. Okay, so that is one other tip that I would just say to you as well. Make sure it's an area that will get some shade if at all possible. You can plant in full sun if it is something that is like a woody ornamental that is really drought tolerant. That could be possible, but I know, when you get into the southern climates and the temperature is just so hot anyways, you have to be really, really careful. All right, so over here what we did was we planted a firelight, and you'll see we have a boxwood in front of it, and the boxwood was actually in the place of where the firelight was. And this garden bed has been established for quite some time. When I initially bought this house, there was a giant juniper over here that basically covered all the way from here all the way over to the end of the sidewalk over there. It was huge and overgrown, and we had to pull that out. And what we're kind of missing on this corner is some height. So one of the things I want to point out to you about planting, whether it's the heat of the summer or not, is to take a look at your eaves. So look at where they come to and how far they go out, because they will keep rain off of your plants. And you want to make sure that you're still in the drip zone of the natural rainwater, because if you're not, you will find yourself with plants that struggle and that need supplemental water during the day. So we came through and we took the boxwood out. That was where the firelight is now. We moved it forward and we pulled out all of the heucheras, and we moved them right to the front of the border to help fill in. So the final tip that I have for you is, after you get all of this wonderful watering done and you've gotten your plant in the ground, it's going to be extremely important also to mulch. And if you can't mulch because you don't have access to mulch or compost to use as mulch or old leaves to use as mulch, certainly think about ensuring that you've covered the ground with perennials or annuals or other plants that can fill in the gaps to help shade the soil. That is super important during the summer. I truly believe that my gardens are much more successful because of the amount of mulch that I use on my garden. We use mulch every single year, and that really helps, because then sometimes when I'm working on a project, I may kind of rob Peter to pay Paul, if you will, and might go to an area of the garden that is more shaded and take a little mulch from there and use it on a new planting area to ensure that it is well covered and that the ground is shaded and mulched. This firelight hydrangea should get about 6 to 8 feet tall and wide. It's not necessarily deer resistant, but I do come out and spray with liquid fence pretty regularly, and so that's an important part of my garden routine. Because this one will get 6 to 8 feet tall and wide, I wanted to move the boxwood in front of it, and indeed the boxwood is deer resistant, so that can help with keeping them from eating things, as well as ensuring that you do have lots of deer resistant perennials planted throughout your garden beds, with those that they also really love. I think this is going to provide some much needed height right here on the corner. It will also kind of help to cover up this gutters or downspout right here, and it's going to be something that, as I limb it up into a small tree form, you'll still be able to see through the stems, and the light will still be let into the house from outside. So I think it's a perfect addition to this space. I'm really enjoying how the addition of hydrangeas on either side of this bench make the entryway to our house, or this garden area, feel more inviting. It kind of softens the edges a bit, and I'm super pleased with how it's turning out. I can't wait to continue to watch it grow. I hope you've enjoyed this video today, and that maybe you've learned a few tips and tricks that can help you with getting some of those plants into the ground at a time when it can be a lot more difficult or intimidating. Thank you so much for joining me today, and we'll see you next time.